We are this close.
We are this close.
Tuturek modest.
This close to making history.
Often wanting.
We are this close.
We are this
We're
close.
this close.
This close to changing the world. We are this close to making sure no child suffers a crippling disease
ever again.
We are this close to making history.
We are this close to ending polio.
Because we are this close to ending polio.
We are this close to ending polio.
We are this close.
to changing the world.
This close.
All we need is you.
Is you.
It's you.
Is you.
We are this close. This close.
Be a part of history at rotary.org/endpolio.
Rotarians, they came here when her mother and father died.
We picked this family around 2004. We were led by a young sister. So we gave them assistance in terms of health, in terms of food, and other utensils that they wanted as a normal child. When these children fall sick, we normally use their guardians and the neighbors, so they telephone to us and seek for help. Because this is a longer distance, in most cases they can't travel to the hospital. So they call us and explain what happens with them and what their problem is. We normally come, examine them, and treat them.
I want to become a nurse to help the orphans. I don't want to see them when they are crying, sick, and they don't have anything to eat.
Despite the fact that their parents died, they wish to have the best life that we all have.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the President of Rotary International, Kalyan Banerjee.
Good morning. I hope that you had an opportunity to enjoy one of the many attractions of this lovely city last evening. Welcome to today's third plenary session. We are so glad you have joined us all this morning. This session is now called to order. To begin this morning's activities, I'd like to welcome to the stage our General Secretary to present the preliminary credential report and other convention announcements. From the Rotary Club of Kyiv, Ukraine, please give a hearty welcome to John Hugo.
Thank you very much, President Banerjee. Ohayo gozaimasu. Bom dia. Buenos dias. Buongiorno. Good morning. We have received and passed upon all credentials presented to us by Rotarians claiming to be voting delegates, alternates, and proxies in this convention. Accredited officers of Rotary International and voting delegates of Rotary clubs present are as follows. Number of clubs in Rotary International, 34,332. Number of clubs represented at this convention, 3,558. Number of delegates, number of club delegates present at this convention, 1,865. Number of votes authorized to be cast by club delegates, alternates, and proxies, 3,653. Number of delegates at large, 140. Bringing the total votes in the convention to 3,793. Now, Article 9, Section 1 of RI bylaws provides that delegates and proxies representing 1/10 of the clubs shall constitute a quorum at a convention. And it is apparent that there is present at the convention a quorum consisting of representatives from more than 1/10 of the clubs in Rotary International. So we recommend that the convention accept this report together with the credentials which have been presented to and advised by the Credentials Committee. Further, we recommend that the convention seat as voting delegates those indicated in this report and named in such credentials. And with that, Mr. President, that concludes the report of the Credentials Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. This next distinguished Rotarian served as past president in 2006-2007, and this year as chair of the Rotary Foundation. And what a remarkable year it has been for our foundation's activities. Please welcome the Master of Ceremonies for this plenary session from the Rotary Club of Pakuranga, New Zealand, Rotary Foundation Chair Bill Boyd.
Good morning, my friends. The administration of our Rotary Foundation revolves around the efforts of a very dedicated group of Rotarians, the trustees of the Rotary Foundation. And it's now my pleasure to introduce to you our current trustees. From the Rotary Club of Trenton, Ontario, our chair-elect, Wilf Wilkinson. From the Rotary Club of Accra, Ghana, Vice Chair Samo Kadutsa and Priscilla. From the Rotary Club of Hanyang, Seoul, Korea, Do Bay and his spouse Tai Young. From the Rotary Club of La Jolla Golden Triangle in California, Steve Brown and Susan. From the Rotary Club of Chattanooga, Tennessee, USA, John Germ and Judy. From the Rotary Club of Curitiba Leste, Parana, Brazil, Antonio Halage and Rose. From the Rotary Club of Loveland, Colorado, USA, Lynn Hammond, and sadly today we are not joined by his spouse Norma. From the Rotary Club of Taipei Sunrise, Taiwan, Jackson Shea and Juliet. From the Rotary Club of Grangemouth, Scotland, past President John Kenny and June. From the Rotary Club of Seoul, Hanggang, Seoul, Republic of Korea, past President D.K. Lee and Young. From the Rotary Club of Muland, Mumbai, India, Ashok Mahajan and Nayantara. From the Rotary Club of Columbia East, South Carolina, USA, and Matthews. From the Rotary Club of Yokosuka, Kanagawa, Japan, Kaz Ozawa. From the Rotary Club of Sandringham, Victoria, Australia, Ian Risley and District Governor Juliet. And from the Rotary Club of Kiev, Ukraine, the Rotary International General Secretary John Hugo and Marga. Next, please, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome the incoming trustees. The first of these has not been able to be with us at this convention. It is from the Rotary Club of Kirksville, Missouri, USA, past President Ray Klingensmith. From the Rotary Club of South Portland, Cape Elizabeth, Maine, USA, Mike McGovern. From the Rotary Club of Kampala, Uganda, Sam Awori and Nora. From the Rotary Club of Barcelona, Condial, Spain, Julio Sorges and Carmen. And there will be one more trustee who will be named at a later date. I would ask you all to acknowledge this group of outstanding Rotarians and their spouses, and I would like my spouse Lorna to join them in standing and being recognised. This is my opportunity to talk to you for a few minutes about our Rotary Foundation. And I thought I would take as my theme, what a difference a day makes. It's the title of an old song. But Rotary, every day around the world, makes a difference. Not in one or two lives, but in hundreds of thousands of lives. Just think of the situation where a group of people who call themselves Rotarians go to a village, talk to the village elders, say, what are the needs of your village? And are told that what they need is a clean water supply. Just think of the impact that has on a woman who spends 2 hours each day walking to a dirty, polluted waterhole to bring back water for her children and has to take her teenage daughter with her. Just think of the difference the day makes when water comes to that village. Immediately she has more time available to her to produce food, maybe to learn a skill, maybe, possibly, to get microcredit. And her children are not going to be sick because they're drinking clean water, and her teenage daughter can get an education. That's the sort of difference that Rotary makes in just one day. For many parents, it's a matter of great sadness when they find that their newborn child has hair lip or cleft palate, because they know that the disfigurement will stop their child from taking a normal part in life. And it's serious. And we have Rotarian volunteers who move around the world giving these children operations that restore their looks, that give them the opportunity to go to school and play with their peers. What a difference that day makes. Lorna and I were in Ghana recently, and we saw photos of a 32-year-old man who had a bad hair lip. And he basically stayed at home because he said whenever he went out, people laughed at him. And Rotary operated on him and gave him a brand new life at the age of 32. That's the sort of difference that Rotarians make. I asked our friend Tracy Zabek, who is really the stage manager and does so much of the production, if she could find one special photo for me. It comes from a project in the Cameroons, when two Rotary clubs and the Rotary Foundation put 3 water tanks on a hill but needed to run a water pipe into the village. Now, the length of the pipe was about 2.5 kilometres. I guess for our American friends, I need to say about 1.5 miles. And when they asked the villagers to come out and help them dig the trench, some 4,000 of them arrived. Now, if you do the math, you'll work out that if it's 2.5 kilometres and there are 4,000 people, they each dig about this much. But the ground looked a bit stony and hard, and so it was probably a little bit of an effort. But what was important was that when the water flowed to that village, that every inhabitant had a sense of ownership. It was their water supply. And when we do projects like that, as Rotarians, we are doing wonderful things. I had a very special day in Calcutta in the company of Director Sheikha Mehta, who yesterday did such a wonderful flag ceremony for us. And Sheikha took me to a number of projects. The first one that we went to was a project that Rotary and the police and a software company were working in slums in Calcutta, and this was the 3rd school that had been set up for children of the slums. It was the usual sort of event. We met in a hall, had a lot of speeches, and then the Commissioner of Police and I walked round to the upstairs room where this school was situated. And they would have had 6 or 8 computers, and there we met the young people from the slum who were going to be given the chance of a brand new life because they had a new skill. And then we got in the car and drove to the hotel that was really the basis of where we were working. We met with a club that was running the Gift of Life project. The Gift of Life is operations performed by Rotarian specialists and their friends to operate on the hearts of babies and children who've been born with heart defects. And the name Gift of Life describes us exactly. That's just what it is. And then I went into a meeting with the Rotary Club that's working with a very special lady called Deepa Willingham, who will be out in the hall somewhere today. And Deepa went to this village called Piali outside Kolkata and started a school for girls. It was 2 rooms that they had rented. And she's gathered friends around her, and she's had foundation support. And the project has expanded on and on. The next step was literacy for the adult women. Then it was vocational training. Then it was microcredit. And now, within a matter of weeks, there will be a brand new school of 12 classrooms, and they're going to invite the boys to join with the girls in the school. And it was Jeffrey Sachs who said that if we're going to change the world, we're going to have to do it one village at a time. Well, the village of Piali is a shining example of what can be done and of the dedication of Deepa. From there, it was to meet with the Commissioner of Police again. And this was because the Rotarians were giving the police 3 rescue recovery vehicles. They're ambulances that are very well equipped. And there was a 4th ambulance to be given to a religious hospital. And the Chief of Police and I, after a few more speeches, went out and we had a checkered flag, and each of us put our hand up and we dropped the checkered flag, and up would drive one of these ambulances. They're beautiful vehicles, and how many lives are they going to touch? And it was getting dark by then, and I thought that would be almost the end of the day. But we got into cars and we went out to another hospital where a Rotarian volunteer surgeon was doing heart operations on children. And there I had a chance to look at the little ones who had been operated on that day and who were still fast asleep. And then to go into a room where there were a group of children, sort of 5 or 6 year olds, who were bouncing around on their beds because their bodies were working again and they were happy, and the parents were standing there with smiles. I was told that the youngest child that the doctor had operated on was a 3-day-old baby. But these children, who really had no future, now had a life ahead of them because of Rotary. You know, so the difference that day made in their lives when they received their operation was absolutely huge. And in India, we went and go to the school for the intellectually handicapped. And I wanted to mention that today because I think it's typical of so many Rotary projects, particularly those that worked with people who are challenged, intellectually or physically. This school was in a building that had been funded by a Rotarian, and the salaries of the staff are being paid by the Rotary Club. But the important point is that when we walked into there, the first noise we heard was the laughter of children. And as we met some of them, they were enjoying each other's company, they were enjoying being at the school, and it was a very happy place. And as we've moved around the world of Rotary, we've visited a number of very happy places, of schools, of camps that have been established by Rotarians. It can be a wonderful project, and you never forget the sounds of the happiness of the laughter. Trustee Steve Brown, about 4 weeks ago, was in Afghanistan. He and President Callion had the opportunity to meet President Karzai. And then Steve went on to the project that he has been working on since November 2002. I'd always thought that they were building schools, and it is true that they've built 2 schools. But over the years, they have addressed the more special needs of that community, really, because they're working in Jalalabad. And now they are focusing on bringing internet connections, of bringing information, of connecting the schools of Jalalabad to the world. They did some health work. They took an oximeter to a teaching hospital and a heart monitoring unit to another hospital. But they went to the Jalalabad College of Education with over 2,300 young people learning to be teachers. It's a school which has 16 computers, an intermittent power supply and no internet connection. But Steve and his friends are going to make sure that that situation changes very quickly. And while they were there on their visit, they had a look at a CAT machine that they had installed in the hospital. And there was a little bit of tweaking to do with the software to make sure that it works properly. But they're taking CAT scans, delivering them overnight by internet to a doctor in California, who was then able to send back the results the next day for the hospital. But the real key comment that came from that doctor, Dr. Doris, was the fact that he said he has saved more lives in the 6 months that he's been doing this work than he had in 30 years of private practice. And you go into a hospital in Jalalabad, you have a CAT scan, and the next day you know what the issue is. And that's the sort of gift that Rotarians give, and that Steve has been working on so strongly for 10 years now. Perhaps just a couple more stories. We in Rotary believe strongly in peace. It's interesting, as you move around within Rotary, the word peace gets spoken again and again and again. 3 weeks ago today, Lorna and I were in Ghana and we visited an Islamist elementary school. Now, the school is part of the project that Rotary and USAID, the US Government Aid Agency, we are working on. 3 major projects in Dominican Republic, Ghana, and the Philippines. And this particular project was a sanitation project, because when the boys and girls wanted to go to the toilet from that school, they had to go out in the jungle. And some of the boys, who were a bit cheeky, took the opportunity to keep on running. And so, as part of this project that USAID and Rotary had put together, we had built 6 toilets, 3 for the boys, 3 for the girls. And the roof sloped, and we were catching the water from the roof when it rains and putting it in a big tank. And on each side of the tank, there is a tap for the girls and the boys to wash their hands. What for us, I guess, is basic sanitation. But this is something new. This is a new message. The village has a good water supply, so the Rotarians decided that to stop the water in the tank being used for other purposes, and to stop anybody walking off with the soap, they put liquid soap in the top of the tank so that when you open the tap, you actually get soap on your hands as well. But that wasn't really why I wanted to talk to you about that project. When we went into the school hall and were met by the principal of the school and many of the children, the ceremony began with an Islamic prayer. But when the ceremony ended, they invited another gentleman to come over and to give a Christian prayer. Now, we often see the divides. We don't see the coming together. And if you ask me if peace is possible, then I've got to say to you, yes, it is. That the divisions are often man-made, and we separate ourselves. But to be there in that school, to open with an Islamic prayer and end with a Christian prayer, to me was something very special. And just last Tuesday, we went to the graduation ceremony of the 12th class of Peace Scholars from Chulalong University. And we there heard a policeman who had been a policeman for 20 years make the statement that the 3 months he has had in Chulalongkorn has made him realise that he's wasted 20 years of his life. Just think of the impact of the peace programs of our Rotary Foundation, that somebody should stand up and say, I realise I've wasted 20 years of my life. But I'd like to end with a story that isn't my story, but it's a true story. The administrator of USAID, the US Government Aid Agency, is Raj Shah. And he went to a village in North Kenya, which has become a refugee settlement. It's a big settlement. And when he was there, he was introduced to a lady and told her story. She had taken off with her 2 little children and her meagre possessions to walk 50 kilometres to the refugee camp. And on the way, she was attacked and beaten and robbed. And she lost her possessions. But she realised that she no longer had the strength to carry her 2 little children. And she was faced with a choice that is almost impossible. I think every mother in this hall is going to say, I could never make that decision. But it was a decision she had to make. And when Raj Shah met her, she was there with her 1 remaining child. And he said she was grieving, and she will never in her life stop grieving. And that, I think, brings us to why we are Rotarians. We can't go back in time and give that woman another chance and save that missing child. But what we can do is that we can go into the villages and bring water and health and education, the opportunity to eradicate the poverty that surrounds them, and to do it in an atmosphere of peace, because that is where Rotary is focusing our efforts. And if we do that in a village, then the women do not have to leave 50 kilometres trying to carry their 2 small children. And that's what's important. And that's why we're here today. And I'm talking to you as the chairman of the Rotary Foundation, because I believe that you know that what is important in our lives are not our possessions. It doesn't truly matter whether we've got the biggest house on the street or the newest motor car. Because we as Rotarians have come to realise a truth that is very important. We make our lives not by what we get, but what we give. And I thank you for your giving to our Rotary Foundation. Thank you. Thank you. I have now been joined by our President to make a very special award. The Rotary Foundation is proud of the wonderful Rotary Foundation scholars that we have produced over the years. And so it was decided in the mid-90s to have a special award for the Alumni of the Year. Now, if you think of the number of scholars that we have had over the years, you'll appreciate that this is a very important trophy, and it's one that is really very hard to choose because we've got so many great people. But each year the trustees select somebody as for the award of the Global Alumni Service to Humanity. And this year, the person who will receive that award is an Australian with a very distinguished record that you will very shortly hear about. And President Callion and I would like to present his award to John Skerritt.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is a most unexpected and true honour. I'm truly honoured and humbled to receive this award, the 2011-12 Global Alumni Service to Humanity Award, especially when you consider the truly deserving people who do such fantastic work at the grassroots for Rotary. I guess I've been fortunate to contribute personally to medical and to agricultural research, but also to have been through having a senior role in the Australian aid program, to be in positions where I've been able to influence government, to invest millions of international aid dollars to assist those who are less fortunate than we are here. My Rotary journey started many years ago as a 16-year-old Interact member, when we decided that our major fundraising activity would be to be sponsored by members of a community to push a hospital bed 100 miles to treat or to help the treatment, to raise money to help the treatment of serious epilepsy. Epilepsy is a not uncommon but rather unfashionable disease. Most of us don't know what to do if a friend or someone in the street has an epileptic seizure. And so it really caught my interest. And so from that early time in Interact, it led me later to do a PhD at Sydney University on epilepsy. Then in 1983, I was very fortunate to receive a Rotary Foundation fellowship or scholarship, and I worked with Rotary support at the University of Michigan with what was one of the world's leading research groups. And our aim was to identify how drugs actually work to treat epilepsy, because this could lead the way for better use of these medicines and for the development of better drugs for treatment of this serious condition. However, on return to Australia, I was asked by our government to take some of these new tools of medical biotechnology and adapt them to food and agriculture. We developed tests for a range of things to help people with cereal allergy and intolerance, as well as new tests for things like pesticides and food and the environment. We also developed tests to improve farm incomes through enhancing food production, tests that avoided rain-damaged grain being mixed with sound grain, and tests for pesticide-resistant insect pests. What's the importance of these tests? They were far cheaper, and they could be run in the field, and so were very useful for developing countries. I had the opportunity in my career to work with a number of countries, indeed 30 countries in all, but I'd bring out the work with the Indian government and the Indonesian government and with FAO on tests for food, water and soil both for pesticides and major livestock diseases. These tests could detect whether food or water was contaminated with pesticides much faster and for 1/10 the cost of current methods. Even to this day, in a number of developing countries, pesticides remain very much both a health and an environmental hazard. That earlier work, which I guess was stimulated by my Rotary Foundation award, stimulated my interest in working in overseas aid. And in 1999, I was appointed Deputy CEO of one of Australia's two main aid agencies, the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research. At ACR, as the centre's called, we had a focus on education and training and helping to increase economic returns, incomes, cash incomes, because cash is what is important but allows people to invest in education, to invest in their health and to invest in the future of their families. And those incomes were from farming and fishery for the poor. And our other aim, our other overarching area of activity was helping communities recover after natural disasters or from civil unrest. Now, you might say, what's the link between research? And it may seem like a luxury when it comes to reducing poverty, but it's absolutely critical in these times. For example, after the civil unrest in East Timor, or Timor-Leste in 1999, we, through the Australian government, saw a need to restore their food security. But it became apparent that most of the major crops for East Timor had actually been bred for much wetter Southeast Asian climates in Indonesia. And so we commissioned a worldwide research program involving 10 countries and 7 centres of the CGIAR to collect varieties of crops from around the world that were much more suited to the drier climates and to the particular soils of Timor. We also needed to rebuild capacity, so we rebuilt the university's agriculture faculty and trained lecturers. And this was important for the next generation of agricultural professionals to help feed what was then the world's newest nation. A couple of years later, after the Southeast Asian tsunami of 2004, it was apparent that you couldn't just return to the old forms of farming. Many of the areas near the coast had a layer of sediment, sometimes up to 1 metre deep, and removal of all this sediment was impossible. It was just too much sediment. It was deposited on fields everywhere. So we needed to work out how to re-establish rice and vegetable production on the affected land through research. Also, sadly, with half of the government's fisheries staff killed, because the fisheries centre was obviously right on the beach where the tsunami hit, and the hatchery for hatching new fish and shrimp destroyed, we also helped re-establish fish farming. Related to the tsunami, there were some tragic stories. 3 of the main professors we collaborated with survived because they actually, like a lot of professors do, went into work that day even though it was a Sunday holiday. But sadly, all their families back home perished. And working with these people and listening to their personal stories was tremendously moving. And yet their commitment to help their country redevelop after the tsunami, even though they had this tremendous personal tragedy. So just as Rotary Fellowships help build understanding internationally, I had the privilege of leading a program of postgraduate training of over 300 agricultural scientists from 18 developing countries. And this assisted in building the next generation of thinkers and leaders. We also developed novel partnerships with industry, the World Bank, International Finance Corporation and non-governmental organisations. And that helped extend the results of agricultural research to the poor. These days, I continue part-time in international development through being chair of the International Water Management Institute. This is an organisation of 300 staff based in over 20 countries. We improve water management and access to water for the poor in both cities and also in rural areas, particularly in Africa and Asia. Some of our recent achievements include the development of information on which rivers and which regions will globally suffer most from water shortages and from stress due to lack of water in the coming years. We have developed technologies to conserve water and to improve the efficiency of its use during farming, and importantly, to improve the safe use of wastewater, so water can be recycled and reused for food. In closing, FAO statistics currently show that something like 930 million people, almost 1 billion people, go to bed hungry each night. And I believe that there's a compelling case for greater involvement by Rotary in helping feed the world through agriculture. To quote Nobel laureate Norman Borlaug, who I had the pleasure of knowing personally before he passed away 4 or 5 years ago, "Without food, man can live at most but a few weeks. Without it, all other components of social justice are meaningless." To further go on and quote John F. Kennedy, "The war against hunger is truly mankind's war of liberation." Rotary indeed could form strong partnerships with researchers and technology providers to help with global food security. As Rotary International President Banerjee stated recently, Rotary has been so successful because Rotary is able to go where no government and very few other NGOs can go. So thank you again for this tremendous award. It's something I'll remember for the rest of my life.
Is our thanks to John. You appreciate just what we're achieving in our Rotary programs. And now I'd like to introduce a very special young lady to you. I mentioned earlier the peace program that we run in the University of Chulalongkorn, a 3-month diploma course. And it takes people who are already in the process of living their career and gives them an opportunity to spend 3 months with people who think as they do, to hear wonderful lecturers and have some great field experience. And when that concludes, you get special people like Amanda Martin. I would like you to now greet a 2011 graduate of our course in Chulalongkorn University, one of our alumna, to talk about how her 3 months at Chulalongkorn influenced her life and her work. Please greet Amanda Martin.
Good morning. It is an honor to address this international audience of Rotarians, program alumni, and guests, all brought together through Rotary, all dedicated to serving communities around the world and to contributing to the global efforts to improve the quality of life for those in greatest need. I speak to you today as an alumna of the Rotary Peace Fellowship Program. Early last year, I spent 3 months at Chulalongkorn University here in Bangkok, studying peace and conflict resolution models and developing tools to apply to the humanitarian work that has taken me from a small town in Connecticut to Guatemala, Colombia, Bolivia, Washington, D.C., and now to the Thai-Burma border. I never would have guessed almost 20 years ago, when I moved to Guatemala as a Peace Corps volunteer, that my life's work would be so influenced by the experience of living in a remote, rural Mayan town. I spent almost 4 years there, working as an integrated agricultural systems specialist. I left that beautiful but desperately poor and violent country just after the historic signing of the peace accords, ending a 36-year war that had resulted in a genocide of the Mayan people. After Guatemala, I spent a year working in China and a year traveling west from China to England before embarking on my career in human rights. I first moved to Bolivia to work in a women's prison on income-generating projects, where I organized a prison bakery program. I also worked in the Chapari jungle to research the impact of the U.S. war on drugs. In 2000, I returned to the United States for 4 years, where I earned 2 master's degrees in social work and public health at the University of South Carolina, while working simultaneously as the director of a Latin American community center for undocumented migrant workers. Upon graduation, I became the director of a statewide peace and justice coalition. The lure of working in the field in Latin America proved hard to resist, and in 2004, I moved to Colombia, site of the longest-running civil war in the Western Hemisphere. I worked in the field with a human rights organization documenting violations including death threats, assassinations, massacres, and forced displacement of Native people. After 3 years in Colombia, I returned to the U.S. to accept a new job as the director of the Guatemala Human Rights Commission. I was based in Washington, D.C., but my work took me to Guatemala frequently to monitor, document, and report on the human rights situation in remote indigenous villages as well as urban areas. I had a perfect job, but after living in Latin America and working on humanitarian issues for 15 of the past 20 years, I felt it was time to open up my horizons and broaden my knowledge of the causes and impact of crisis situations around the world. I also wanted to get an academic grounding for the work that I was already doing. A good friend of mine from Pakistan, also a Rotary Fellow, highly recommended the Rotary Peace Fellowship to me. After careful research, I applied and was accepted into the January 2011 cohort of 14 fellows from 11 countries across Asia, Africa, and the Americas. The Capitol Hill Rotary Club in Washington, D.C. nominated me, and I'm extremely grateful for their strong support throughout the process. The 3 months I spent at Chulalongkorn University last year was an incredibly enriching and stimulating experience. The course involved in-depth analysis of a wide range of conflict situations. The discussions were led by world-class experts and included case studies on conflict situations from around the world. The program included 2 field studies, each of which left a deep impression on me. We first traveled to the Isan region of northeast Thailand to visit communities displaced by a hydroelectric dam, and to the border of Laos to meet with the stateless people. We spoke with local leaders, elders, women, and youth who have organized over the past 25 years to reclaim their rights. One of the most vivid images I had on this trip is sitting on a woven mat with a group of women, members of the People's Assembly of the Poor, in front of City Hall in Ubon Ratchathani, one of the provincial capitals in the Isan region. They were occupying the area in protest of the government's refusal to recognize the results of its own impact study on the Pakmun Dam. This report recommended that the people affected by the construction of the dam be compensated for lost livelihoods and land. The People's Assembly of the Poor is an umbrella organization in Thailand that helps those affected by development projects and industries to become involved in the decision-making process so that they may benefit from those projects. The protesting group consisted of several hundred people who were well organized, determined, and had a clear set of demands. 1 week later, they traveled to Bangkok to occupy the area in front of Parliament, along with a group of several thousand people from Isan and other regions, demanding land rights and community consultation. I visited this same group of women when they came back to Bangkok the following week. Miraculously, I found them amidst the thousands of people camping out on the street on a dark night in February. I sat with them and listened to their needs and demands. Despite languages and cultural differences, these are the very same issues affecting impoverished rural communities throughout Guatemala, and the people are organizing in similar ways. Our second field study took us to Nepal to understand the impact of the 10-year civil war, won by the Maoist rebels in 2006. What had changed since then? Had the new government achieved greater equality, and improved social welfare programs for the people? We spent 10 days discussing these issues with community organizations, NGOs, the National Women's Congress, demobilized child soldiers, and Maoist government leaders, all of whom provided us with a wide range of perspectives, sharing their expectations and disappointments and their hopes for change. I distinctly recall meeting with a group of somber young men who served as child soldiers in the Maoist army. We sat in the patio of our hotel in Kathmandu, talking in small groups to facilitate conversation and overcome their shyness. They, like the child soldiers that I knew in Guatemala and Colombia, were victims of war, forced into military service through indoctrination, poverty, and the desire to escape an entrenched caste system and severely limiting gender roles. An estimated 10,000 child soldiers served in the Maoist army and were then sent to live in United Nations cantonments in the post-war era. The reintegration process for the minors to return home to their families and villages was not easy. Many faced rejection from former friends and family for serving in the military. They were rejected from entering the Nepalese army in the current post-war period due to their status as minors during the war. The boys who sat next to me were enrolled in the underprivileged children's educational program to receive vocational training for ex-combatants. One of the young men had become a computer specialist, and the other a musician. This was a powerful narrative and an excellent example of conflict transformation in post-war Nepal. Everyone was affected by the 10-year war, but that history is invisible unless you sit down and ask the right questions. Rotary provided me with that opportunity. By the end of the program, I was enamored with Thailand. I have never before lived in such a safe, peaceful, and respectful society. I was also fascinated by the human rights situation in Burma, which is comparable to Guatemala in so many ways. I was invited to apply for a position which required relocating to Thailand and dedicating my work to humanitarian and educational efforts for Burmese refugees on the Thai-Burma border. After much soul-searching, I accepted this offer and returned to Thailand in July 2011. I currently work in Mesat, Thailand, on the border of Burma, with the Global Health Access Program as the Public Health Institute Program Development Coordinator. I spend half of my week living and teaching in Umpiam Mai refugee camp, and the other half working at the GAP office in Mesat. Umpiam is home to 18,000 refugees from Burma. I live in a bamboo hut on top of a mountain in Section 10, Zone B of the camp. My hut is surrounded by the campus classrooms and is a steep 30-minute hike from the highway up the mountain. I bring my books, computer, and favorite snacks in my backpack every week, and after a day of teaching, I spend the star-filled evenings reading by flashlight under my mosquito net. The camp loudspeaker announcements, the Muslim call to prayer, and the gnawing of the rats on the bamboo hut posts are the only interruptions after dark. Camp life is challenging in many ways. Electricity is rationed to 2 hours per day, and I must haul buckets of water to my hut for my morning bath splash. I can enjoy this experience because I have the freedom to leave camp and return to town, unlike the refugees who are not allowed to leave. I teach public health education, disease prevention, and health promotion at the first established public health college for Burmese refugees. The students come from conflict zones inside Burma, the majority from Karen State, which is home to the world's longest civil war since 1948. They all have tragic stories of forced labor, internal displacement, military attack, soldiers raping their family members, and resultant suicide, forced military recruitment, and many other human rights violations. Over the past 10 years, their families fled to Thailand to escape the violence against ethnic minorities. The camp is high up in the mountains, just 10 kilometers from the Burma border. The refugees live in bamboo huts with thatched roofs made of leaves. The sun beats down during the afternoon, but the cold mountain air requires a coat and blanket at night. Each registered refugee is allotted a monthly ration of food, including rice, oil, fish paste, and yellow beans. But the rations were cut in half last year due to lack of funding. There is no formal employment in the camp except for a few jobs with NGOs. The problems in camp stem from issues of powerlessness, lack of access to land, lost livelihoods, poor quality education, limited health services, poverty, gender inequality, discrimination, harsh conditions, unemployment, and confinement. My work necessitates addressing these issues in the public health program that I'm developing. The tools that I acquired during the Rotary Peace Fellowship are proving to be very relevant and useful. One peace-building tool that I reflect on often is Mary Anderson's Do No Harm principle, which challenges humanitarian agencies to take responsibility for the impact of their aid that inevitably has unintended consequences in conflict zones. Foreign assistance can save lives, build homes, provide food, and access to health care. However, it can also create divisions among those who receive the aid and those who do not, and create a culture of dependency. Currently, the refugees are wholly dependent on the NGOs for basic survival. Prior to living in camp, the refugees were village leaders, teachers, farmers, business owners, students, and traditional healers, proud and respected members of their ethnic communities. They governed their villages, grew their own crops, traded in local markets, procured building materials, and cared for the sick, albeit while living in an impoverished and war-torn area. This culture of dependency has disempowered 142,000 Burmese refugees on the border. As the current Burmese government shows signs of shifting toward positive democratic change, the future of the camps is uncertain. When the camps close down, the refugees will have to fend for themselves, either in Burma, in Thailand, or resettled in a foreign country. I want to share with you an inspirational experience from my classroom. In January, I taught my students about the UN Declaration on Human Rights. Edo, one of the best students, shot his hand in the air and waved it wildly. "Teacher, teacher, I am very angry," he shouted emphatically. "Why has no one ever taught us this before? I am in college and I have never seen my 30 human rights until today." As we reviewed the 30 articles, the students became more incensed. "We are refugees. We don't get human rights," one of the young women said. I explained the 1951 UN Refugee Convention and the special status of refugees. The students again cried out, "We do not get these refugee rights. We need to give a training on refugee rights to the camp commander. He does not know that we have these rights," they announced. I explained that none of Burma's neighboring countries has signed onto the Refugee Convention, and thus it is not enforceable in those countries, including Thailand. "How can we convince them to sign on?" they asked. We discussed the role of the UNHCR and how it has limited scope in Thailand due to its political agreement with the government. I'm currently negotiating with the director of the Karen Refugee Committee's Educational Department to include a refugee rights workshop for the camp commander and the camp committee as part of their public health curriculum. In the words of Eleanor Roosevelt, "Where, after all, do universal rights begin? In small places close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. Without concerned citizen action to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world." Daily challenges are enormous for a refugee. When tragedy strikes, the impact in a community that owns next to nothing is catastrophic. On February 23, 2012, a fire started in Section 9 of Zone B in Umpiam Camp. A woman was frying a snack in her kitchen, and the thatched roof of her hut caught fire. Within 2 hours, 900 houses were burned to the ground. 4,500 people lost their homes, their clothing, their few possessions, including pots and pans, and their monthly food rations distributed only a few days before the fire. 3 mosques, 2 nursery schools, and a community center burned down. Several children were severely burned, and 2 of them are rumored to have died. That night, the community organized to create temporary shelters in the 2 remaining mosques, a storage warehouse, and the camp hall. The outpouring of support for the fire victims was truly inspirational. For the next 14 days, truckloads of donations poured into the camp from the community in nearby Mesat, from individual donations and from the NGO warehouses. Refugees from all 16 sections of the camp came to help. People with homes invited fire victims to stay with them until their huts were rebuilt. In a 2-meter square hut already occupied by a large family, this was an exceedingly generous offer. For many refugees, the fire triggered memories of forced displacement and being burned out of their previous camp by the Burmese army. These victims currently are receiving psychosocial support by trained community health workers, who are paired along with my public health students to provide targeted assistance for extremely vulnerable fire victims. My work in establishing the first public health institute for refugee students is a step toward preparing trained public health professionals. My students will graduate and spend the next year as interns with community-based health organizations on the border. I am convinced that their knowledge and experience with the refugee situation, coupled with their determination to improve the quality of life for the people of Burma, will bring positive transformation to a 60-year-old conflict. For me personally, to play a role in this change, to create the possibility for refugee students to be trained as the next generation of public health workers for a new Burma, addressing the most remote, neglected areas of Eastern Burma, is inspiring and fulfilling. My work also includes creating a sustainable program that is driven by local needs, applicable to the local culture and the surrounding environment, and is locally supported and managed. When my work is done, I should be able to leave unnoticed while the program continues to run smoothly and efficiently. There are refugee problems throughout the world. Many of them involve gross violations of human rights. They do not attract the media coverage of the Arab-Israeli dispute or of disputes in other high-profile areas such as Sudan or Somalia, but they are very real and equally deserving of support and solutions. Rotary can make a difference in these situations. As President Kalyan noted recently, when we in Rotary work for peace, we don't do it by negotiating treaties or demonstrating in the streets. Instead, we build peace by example, by working together, whatever our nationality or background, and putting others' needs above our own. We build peace by dealing with the problems that disrupt people's ability to live normal, peaceful lives, whether those problems are a lack of water or sanitation or safe, affordable housing, whether they stem from a shortage of education or healthcare, or a need to build productive and positive connections between communities. Rotary has already made a dramatic difference in my life and is having a profound ripple effect, radiating from me to my students and on to the impoverished populations that they will serve as public health workers. Prioritizing service over self connects people in ways that promote goodwill and peace. I am extremely grateful for the opportunities that Rotary has offered me thus far, and see many opportunities for how Rotary can be involved in the promotion of positive change inside Burma and on the border. Thank you, Rotary, for giving me this most amazing and life-changing opportunity.
Thank you, Amanda. You've taken us to a world that I think many of us never really think about and understand and appreciate. That was a wonderful presentation. And so now we have that little break. I thought I might say that because you've been such a good group of people today, you've earned yourself a special gift, and that's a 10-minute interlude. But can we make it 10 minutes because we've got some great speakers still to come? Thank you.
Jigiba kuma jigile tisra dombaliya ye ma bison mata ma do dombaliya te ma kumbete ma dombaliya ye Kanu de bage adama denya kanu de bage jenyanya kanu de yake mabi koto dotala nyama Fato biabi tama nyamanga nyamanti favo manyumani majugo biabi tama nyamanga sunuti favo ngalakanga nyaman sunungi kadu nyamaka kuno dunya mati famu lomba tikelala o manna ke mani dia nyabaye ito songo nondo wongala kusumbe mala niña so sombe mamulo balila o manna ke mani wolo de niñe ito songo nondo wongala kusumbe mala niña so sombe soñali kalala o manna ke mani furu nywani nye ito songo lundo wongala ko kanide kabako ye kanide kabako ye kanide kabako ye kanide kabako ye kanide kabako ye
Attention! Laser light technology will be used in the second half of this session, which may present a challenge for light-sensitive individuals and those with conditions triggered by rapid light movement. Please alert the nearest Sergeant-at-Arms about your condition before the start of the second half of this session. Thank you.
Votre attention s'il vous plaît. La deuxième partie de cette séance plénière débutera par un show laser. Nous demandons aux personnes qui pourraient être incommodées d'en informer les voltigeurs avant qu'elle ne commence. Merci.
Attenzione! L'illuminazione con luci laser usata all'inizio di questa sessione plenaria potrebbe causare complicazioni alle persone sensibili alla luce e suscettibili alle luci a movimento rapido. Siete pregati di informare i prefetti più vicini a riguardo prima dell'inizio della seconda parte della sessione. Grazie.
ご案内申し上げます。セッションの後半ではレーザー光線を使った演出が行われます。光に敏感な方、瞬時に交錯する光によって特定の症状が引き起こされる可能性のある方は、後半の始まる前にお近くの会場監督までお知らせください。
심사숙녀 여러분, 본회의 2부 순서 프로그램에는 레이저 테크놀로지가 사용됩니다. 혹시 레이저 광선이나 빛이 빠르게 움직이는 것에 민감하신 분들은 2부 순서가 시작되기 전에 사찰에게 말씀해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
各位来宾，这个全体会议的后半部将有镭射闪光的演出。 如果对闪光敏感的人，请在这个全体会议第二步开始以前和纠察联络。
Atenção! As luzes e projeções de laser usados no início dessa sessão plenária podem provocar incômodos em pessoas sensíveis à luz ou a movimentos rápidos de luzes. Caso sofra de algum desses problemas, informe um dos Sergeant at Arms antes da plenária. Obrigado.
Su atención, por favor. La tecnología de rayos láser que se utilizará en la segunda mitad de la sesión plenaria podría afectar a las personas con sensibilidad a la luz, y las pulsaciones lumínicas podrían desencadenar una reacción adversa en ciertas condiciones médicas. Informe al masero más próximo sobre su condición médica antes del inicio de la sesión plenaria. Gracias.
Внимание! Лазерные технологии, которые будут использоваться во второй части сегодняшнего заседания, могут представлять опасность для людей с чувствительностью к свету, а также для людей, для которых частая перемена света может приводить к приступам. Пожалуйста, сообщите об этом ближайшему к вам приставу перед началом пленарного заседания.
โปรดทราบเราจะใช้เทคโนโลยีแสงเลเซอร์ในครึ่งหลังของการประชุมในช่วงนี้ซึ่งอาจเป็นปัญหาสำหรับท่านที่แพ้แสงและท่านที่มีปัญหาซึ่งเกิดจากแสงที่เคลื่อนไหวอย่างรวดเร็วโปรดแจ้งให้เจ้าหน้าที่ซึ่งอยู่ใกล้กับท่านมากที่สุดทราบถึงปัญหาของท่านก่อนการประชุมในครึ่งหลังจะเริ่มต้น
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats for the start of the second half of this plenary session.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage the chair of the Rotary Foundation, Bill Boyd.
Thank you. Thank you for coming back so promptly. Our next speaker is somebody who has been a very special supporter of our Rotary Foundation and of the work of Rotary. You've got a full biography on page 20 of your program, and I suggest that later you take the opportunity to read it through. But Mrs. Burler sits on the board of all of the companies that form the Aditya Burler Group, which is a Fortune 500 company and one of Asia's most diversified conglomerates. And that's as much of the formal introduction that I thought I would give, because I would like to say something about Mrs. Burler. She is a very special lady. She is one of India's top businesswomen and philanthropist, and yet she retains a humility, a graciousness that makes her just something different, something special. She has been a tremendous supporter of our Rotary Foundation. I haven't checked the figures, but she would be one of the greatest individual donors to our Rotary Foundation, yet she is not herself a Rotarian. She's an honorary Rotarian in 2 Rotary clubs. But as we've fought the battle to eradicate polio from India, there have been a number of parties who have really helped us. The work of our fellow Rotarians, the support of the Indian government, which was very important to our efforts, our partners, of course, in World Health, UNICEF, CDC. But one of those who was one of our greatest supporters, has been Mrs. Birla, and I would like you to greet her now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Boyd, for such a generous introduction. It's really encouraging. President Kalyan Banerjee and Foundation Trustee Chair, Mr. Boyd, thank you for inviting me to join and participate in the 2012 Rotary International Convention. Rotarians and friends of Rotary, it is indeed an honor and a great privilege to be with you at this global convention of Rotarians. Rotary International is an institution that I hold in deep esteem and total admiration. The work that you do to make a difference to the world is an absolute inspiration. I particularly like to compliment President Kalyan Banerjee for the outstanding leadership he has provided to the Rotary world this year. And to the Foundation Chair, Mr. Bill Boyd, for guiding the Foundation so remarkably well. In my brief talk, I have been asked to share firstly, how did we begin our bond with Rotary International? And secondly, what is the difference that Rotary International and our group has made towards polio eradication, fundamentally the Indian story. And the third point, which I want to put before all of you, is a philosophy, a way of life, and that is giving is living. A brief introduction to our group is in order. The Aditya Birla Group is a $35 billion multinational corporation. Our operations span 36 countries, and we have 133,000 strong, committed workforce comprising of 42 nationalities. Our work in society, particularly for the underprivileged, is channelized through the Aditya Birla Center for Community Initiatives and Rural Development, which I am privileged to spearhead. We work in 3,000 villages, reaching out to 7 million people across geographies. Our focus areas are healthcare, education, sustainable livelihood, infrastructure, and espousing social reform. For this audience, the area of interest is healthcare, and particularly polio eradication. So let me begin with our story. More than a decade ago, a few Rotarian friends urged me to help Rotary International in their ambitious global polio eradication program. I was given a detailed brief of Rotary's massive contribution to making a difference through projects in healthcare, education, and sustainable livelihood. But the unrelenting focus was on polio eradication. I was deeply touched. Thus, our group got initiated into polio eradication. The group of polio eradication champions who approached me included Rotarian Kalyan Banerjee, Rotarian Rajendra Sabu, Rotarian Ashok Mahajan, and many more. I must also mention the tremendous spirit of camaraderie and solidarity that Rotarians display. Regardless of geographies, Rotarians go the extra mile and unite together for a cause. As an honorary fellow Rotarian, over these years, I have moved out of the ringside view to band with the Rotarians all over the world. Since then, there has been no turning back. And this brings me to the second point, the difference that Rotary International has made to our world here and elsewhere. Honestly, I have been overwhelmed, especially with the Rotary International Polio eradication drive. For years on, Rotary International has been working relentlessly towards this. Your worldwide Polio Plus programs has been exemplary in its planning and in its meticulous execution, and the result is there for all of us to see. We in India have benefited greatly. Today, there is a spirit of celebration and happiness in the country. India has been taken off the WHO list of polio endemic countries. For one full year, we in India have managed to keep our nation polio-free despite all odds. Our progress has been very impressive. This January 13, 2012, we rejoiced at the first year of India being polio-free. This is an amazing For this, we owe a debt of gratitude to the Rotary International, governments of all the countries of the world, and the health departments who have been dogged in their perseverance in ensuring that every child is immunized against polio. We at the Aditya Birla Group endeavored to help Rotary International and the government by supporting them around our factories all over the country. Let me also take this opportunity to share with you that with the unrelenting support of these institutions in the year 2011, we managed around 30,000 polio booths. Up until now, we have been able to help administer polio drops to over 10 million children. The polio eradication program has been a resounding success so far, thanks to our collaborative efforts. The eradication of polio in India, in a manner of speaking, has been a giant leap towards the world vision of freedom from polio. Based on the success of the Rotary International's initiatives in India, coupled of course with the admirable backing of the government's health departments and institutions like WHO, UNICEF, CDC, and the Gates Foundation, the day is not far off for us to envisage the elimination of polio in the other 3 countries where unfortunately its traces remain, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, and in Nigeria. We owe it to ourselves and to humanity at large to ensure that in these 3 countries, polio becomes an affliction of the past. Before I move to the stoic aspect of why giving is living, I want to assert that for corporates, giving and living must become an integral part of a corporate ethos and corporate character. Let me briefly explain why I think all corporates must embed giving in their DNA. First of all, when a corporation pushes its energies and helps resolve social sector issues through its engagement, indirectly, it stimulates its own business development. There is so much to be gained when business leaders take giving to heart and set the mandate of making a difference through caring for the people, mainstreaming it into their companies. Mainstreaming such a philosophy within an organization entails legitimate, credible, and ongoing manner into its day-to-day activities. It means integrating those aspects into the innards of the organization, into its marketing, into its community initiatives, and encouraging employee volunteerism on an ongoing basis. It implies allocating funds and ensuring high visibility on the corporate agenda. It implies your wallet share so that it becomes a part of the organization's DNA. The canvas is vast. Now let me give 4 good reasons why this must be done. Firstly, most important of all, healthy communities make for a healthy workforce. At the end of the day, a corporation's catchment area and its most important constituency is its workforce. All of you here represent, I guess, corporations that either you work for or you lead. All of us know that 70% of our human body is comprised of water. Without this 70%, the momentum would be lost. Likewise, in most organizations, while 20% may be the executive force, 80% are the work bees. They come from communities in the proximity to the location. It is critical, therefore, to ensure that this is a healthy community. Healthy communities make for healthy organizations in each and every way. It is also important to keep your gaze beyond these immediate communities to the larger community at the periphery. Another point that I want to stress is that today it is talented people who provide the cutting edge to organizations. Professionals of the highest order want increasingly to align with a company that not only enjoys a reputation for its values, quality products, and services, but is also committed to giving. Today's young want to ensure that the benefit of capitalism percolates down. Talent believes that wealth creation is a noble pursuit. They feel that wealth can be best enhanced by distributing it. So you see the spawning of a new ethos of generosity and the desire to build a society that works for everyone. This is how capitalism will have to be redefined itself in the 21st century. Increasingly, I find that a company's corporate social initiative make for a legitimate, compelling, and increasingly important way to attract, retain, and energize the talent pool. In our own group, I have seen this happen. Employees have openly said that they have joined us because we are a meritocracy and we exhibit exemplary corporate citizenship. Secondly, this creates a tremendous goodwill among consumers, far in excess of the price tag. Customers show a definite preference for companies with a social conscience. A growing body of evidence reveals the positive linkages between corporates and that give to worthwhile societal causes and financial performance. Consumers look upon our group and its companies as having a social consciousness. So there is a marked preference for our products. In all of the sectors that we operate in, say cement, aluminium, copper, carbon black, branded apparel, to name a few, we are leaders. Thirdly, shareholders and the investor community also gravitate towards organizations that give for the larger cause and are socially responsible. For example, most of our 1.5 million shareholders and investors have confidence in our group. They feel that this is a group that they would definitely like to support. In all of our group companies' annual reports, we provide a quantified evidence of our social and environmental performance. I have seen at the annual general meeting the special pride that large number of shareholders take in their involvement with our companies on this score. Fourthly, social projects which entail a considerable amount of giving are also a means of sharing with the community the values that an organization stands for. It is a way of telling them that we care about you, that your concerns are ours as well, and that we are a principled people led by a moral compass. It is also a way of garnering community support for social projects. Importantly, there is a fundamental shift that we see. The public also at large have expectations of businesses. Business has to be involved in the problems that we face as a global society. And finally, I want to share with you that giving is in fact living. This is my deep-rooted conviction. To me, giving is an expression of joy, love, and caring. It is being useful to those around us, to the world in concrete ways. Giving is like blessing your own life, because when you give with open heart, the good that you do for others comes back to you in some form of a blessing. The act of giving, in my view, brings about a different kind of renewal, that of hope. It is a life's reaffirming act. Let me share my own experience through the story of Vishnu, a young girl who was struck with polio. We first saw her at Nagda in Madhya Pradesh, India. She was half bent because she would grip her legs and drag her feet, which were crippled. Our team found her in this sorry state. Hoping against hope, they brought her to our hospital. When the surgeons reviewed her case, they felt that they could perform a polio corrective surgery, and perhaps she could start walking again. So we took up her case, and the surgeons were able to turn the clock back. The post-operative period was marked by months of physiotherapy and a lot of physical pain, but she held up well. Vishnu is now a great farmhand. We have given her some seed money to start her own vegetable vendoring and help her parents on their small farm. For her parents, to see Vishnu walk again, though with a little limp, is nothing short of a miracle. Understandably, their joy is indescribable. When we look at her, it bolsters my faith in humanity, my faith in the power of moving beyond your own sphere. And this is just one example. When you reflect in the quiet of your soul, you realize fully that God has given you and me an abundance of His grace. All of us have a moral duty to share some part of it in any way we can to enhance, to make a difference to the lives of those who need support and to society at large. Let me conclude with Stephen Rellet, a prominent French missionary, said long ago, "I shall pass through this world but once. Any good, therefore, that I can show to any human being, let me do it now." Let me not defer nor neglect it, for I shall not pass again this way. Let this be mankind's mantra for this millennium and beyond. Thank you so much.
You have just met a remarkable woman in Mrs. Rajashri Burla and a remarkable supporter of the work that we do in Rotary. We're now going to have a short video clip from somebody else who is also a very strong supporter of Rotary. We have a video from the co-chair of the Gates Foundation, Bill Gates.
Hello. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person to discuss the incredibly important topic of polio eradication. Today, the world's population immunity against polio is at an all-time high. With India's recent success protecting its 172 million children from polio, we've never been closer to our goal of a polio-free world. Without Rotary, the global effort never would have come this far, and the Gates Foundation wouldn't have had a chance to get involved in a very deep way. Your dedicated efforts on the front lines for more than 25 years have played a critical part in getting us to where we are today, the brink of eradication. I'm convinced that your dedicated efforts will continue to be key to carry the global effort across the finish line. Rotary's fundraising efforts exceeded our initial $200 million challenge. Your commitment inspired us to give Rotary another $50 million to continue additional fundraising. And we need it. India's achievement of being declared polio-free proves once again that polio eradication strategies work even in the most challenging environments. Now we need to build on this momentum. We're in the final stretch of this marathon towards achieving eradication. The last push is where it's going to count the most. It's also going to take the biggest effort. This is where I believe Rotarians have a lot more to offer and where I'd like to ask for your help. For many years, in addition to giving your dollars and helping with fundraising support, you've lent your time and your voices to the cause. Now it is time to raise your voices even louder. The most important thing you can do is to inspire and motivate others to be as committed to polio eradication as you are. You are the most important advocates for polio eradication we have. You're capable of mobilizing others to help ensure your governments in both donor and polio-affected countries are as committed as they need to be. So I'm asking you to do three things. First, pick a day for Rotarians to visit your country's capital and make the case for polio to officials. Go to their public meetings and ask them what more they can do to help end polio. Second, invite elected officials to visit Rotary clubs and use those meetings to make the case for polio support. Thank those who've been supportive, and for those who haven't, give them a chance to join the fight. Finally, share the polio story with your community and build a groundswell of support that will amplify your voice. If there was ever a time when we need your voice, it's now. These actions are critical for letting our governments know that we need them, their resources, and their commitment until the end. Thank you for your amazing work and your ongoing commitments to continue until we reach the finish line. I know that with your help, we can rid the world of polio for once and for all.
Our next speaker joined the World Health Organization in 1992 as a medical officer working in the general field of immunization with a particular interest in measles, neonatal tetanus and hepatitis. He worked 7 years with national immunisation programs at the field level in the Middle East, Western Pacific, Europe, North Africa, and Central Southeast Asia, before coming to the World Health Headquarters in Geneva. Since 1998, Bruce has been responsible for the oversight and coordination of all polio eradication activities within the World Health's regional offices. He flew in last night from Geneva. He flies back to Geneva tomorrow. And this is typical of the man, because if anybody has a dedication to polio, and I know that there are many of you who are dedicated to polio, but this is a man who has really put himself on the line to help us achieve what we want to achieve. Earlier this year, he became the Assistant Director General for polio, and this for us was a wonderful feeling because we knew the effort that Bruce had put in, and it was wonderful to see that recognised within World Health, that he be given the rank of Assistant Director General. So he is special to us, and I welcome to the podium now Bruce Arwood.
Ladies and gentlemen, 2 years ago, the largest country on the Asian subcontinent was still infected with polio. 2 years ago, half of the children being paralyzed by polio worldwide lived in this one country. 2 years ago, skeptics and cynics around the world said this country proves polio can't be eradicated. Ladies and gentlemen, today, India is polio-free. Today, Rotary's vision of a polio-free world is much, much closer to a reality. Today, on the 8th of May, 2012, we have the lowest number of polio-infected countries and the lowest number of polio-paralyzed children in history. There was no silver bullet that finally killed off the seemingly unstoppable polio virus in India. There were technical innovations, like this new bivalent polio vaccine. There were special strategies to reach children who had been repeatedly missed during polio campaigns. And there was strong national leadership, including from the Minister of Health himself. These were all important, but most importantly, there were Rotarians. Rotarians who generously donated money to ensure every child in India could be vaccinated and every polio virus could be detected. Rotarians who willingly gave their time to convince national and local leaders that every child had to be vaccinated. Rotarians who consistently found solutions to the inevitable day-to-day emergencies that continually arose in this battle. Rotarians who passionately monitored the program at all levels to keep the rest of us on our toes. A polio-free India is a magnificent achievement, and it is Rotary's achievement. On the 23rd of February, I presented the Government of India with a letter announcing that for the first time in history, India was being removed from WHO's list of countries with polio. And when the Prime Minister of India stood up a few minutes later to acknowledge this magnificent achievement, he didn't say, "Thank you, WHO," or "Thank you, UNICEF," or "Thank you, Bill Gates," or "Thank you, CDC." He said, "Thank you, Rotary." With this achievement, ladies and gentlemen, the world passed perhaps the most important milestone ever on the very long road to polio eradication. Because with this announcement that India is now polio-free, there is finally indisputable, unequivocal proof that Rotary is right. Polio can be eradicated everywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, with India coming polio-free, there are now no technical or biological barriers to completing polio eradication. We've crossed the Rubicon. There are only political and societal barriers at this point. And these are barriers that your organization, that Rotary, is uniquely positioned to address. Over the past 24 years of our partnership, to reach every child everywhere in the world with the oral polio vaccine, I've come to know what Rotary is very, very good at. Rotary has proven again and again that its 1.2 million Rotarians in 33,000 Rotary clubs in 170 countries around the world are much better than us at some things. You're much better than us, your partners, when it comes to the political and the societal challenge. You are better than the World Health Organization. You're better than UNICEF. You're better than the U.S. Centers for Disease Control. And don't tell him I said this, but you're also better than Mr. Bill Gates at some of these things. Rotarians, you are better at convincing political leaders to hold local authorities and vaccinators accountable. You are better at convincing parents of the importance of getting their children vaccinated. You are better at convincing donor governments of the value in investing in polio eradication. Your voice, Rotary's voice, is the most powerful weapon we have in the war against polio. And you have a lot of good news to put your voice behind. In addition to India, last year, every country which had been reinfected with polio, except Chad, also stopped their infection and their polio cases. Last year, the new bivalent polio vaccine that we've been using also brought a second polio virus, the type 3 polio virus, to the verge of extinction. As you put Rotary's voice behind the final battle to finish off polio, be assured that the world is completely with you in this war. Tomorrow, as Chairman Bill said, I will get back on a plane and fly back to Geneva to begin preparing for an unprecedented push to finish this war against polio. In 1 week, 194 ministers of health from all over the world will be gathering in Geneva to declare that completing your dream, Rotary's dream of a polio-free world, must now be an emergency for global public health. Completing polio eradication is now an emergency because as India became polio-free, there was an unexpected and dangerous upsurge in paralyzed children in northern Nigeria, in Pakistan, and in Afghanistan late last year. Completing polio eradication is now an emergency because recent outbreaks on 3 continents highlighted the increasingly dangerous consequences of failure. In China, in Congo, and in Tajikistan, explosive outbreaks took on a sinister new dimension, paralyzing not just children, but also adults. And up to 50% of those adults died. Completing polio eradication is now an emergency because the world fully understands the consequences of failure. In addition to the more than 250,000 children who would again be paralyzed by this virus every single year, the world understands these horrific consequences, and the world understands that these are unacceptable. Polio is a deadly, devastating disease. Eradication must be completed so that it can never return. Rotarians, you have convinced the world's health ministers now that the completion of polio must be declared an emergency for global public health. You, Rotarians, have convinced the world that if any child is permanently paralyzed by polio, it is now a global emergency. If any child is not reached with the oral polio vaccine, it is now an emergency. If the world cannot overcome the barriers to reaching every child everywhere with the very basics of healthcare, it is now an emergency. And in this emergency, we must be faster, we must be more focused, and we must all, every one of us, be fully accountable. We must be faster in finding the children who are repeatedly missed with our new polio vaccines. We must be faster in finding out why we miss these children, and faster in finding a way to ensure they are never missed again. We must be more focused in applying ourselves to the greatest geographic and operational challenges where the virus now clings on in northern Nigeria and in the border areas of Pakistan and Afghanistan. We must be fully accountable, from each head of state and the head of each one of our partner agencies to each vaccinator in the field. We must all play our role to finish the job in these last infected areas. Ladies and gentlemen, your core partners, WHO, my organization, UNICEF, and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control are all going into emergency mode. The Director General of WHO and the Director of CDC have moved polio into our emergency operations centers to ensure we are faster, more focused, and fully accountable to our leadership. WHO and UNICEF have already begun deploying a huge additional surge of assistance, eventually totaling more than 6,000 additional people into the infected areas of Nigeria and Pakistan. And the Executive Director of UNICEF is himself leading a high-level polio security task force to scale up new solutions for operating in insecure areas. Most importantly, though, Nigeria and Pakistan are changing their game as well. In both of these countries, the head of state has publicly pledged to lead a new, renewed emergency effort to stop the remaining poliovirus transmission. In both countries, the head of government has appointed and empowered a national polio leader, answering directly to the head of government themselves to run their polio emergency effort. And in both countries, the head of government has established a national task force to hold every local leader directly accountable for the quality of emergency eradication activities in their jurisdictions. And in Nigeria, ladies and gentlemen, the President has gone even further. the President of Nigeria has just pledged to provide US $30 million of domestic funding to the program every year until polio is finished. Rotarians, you have set this extraordinary emergency effort in motion. You are changing the world. You are making the world a better place for children today, tomorrow, and, if you rise to this last challenge, forever. Your foundation has already reaffirmed that Polio Plus is your most urgent priority. Now your foundation and the world is counting on every Rotarian to play an active role in bringing this great eradication effort, this great effort in social justice, to a successful conclusion. Ladies and gentlemen, this beautiful young girl is Ruksar Khatun. On the 13th of January 2011, she was the last child to be paralyzed by polio in India. She is the last child paralyzed by polio in India because Rotarians stood up and said, enough, polio stops here. Rotary's voice stopped polio in India. To stop polio everywhere, we are taking the many, many lessons that we learned from India and rapidly applying them in Nigeria, in Pakistan, and in Afghanistan. But we need every Rotarian to stand up and say, enough. Polio stops here. Nobody stood. Rotary, your voice is essential for stopping polio in the rest of the world. Rotary's voice is essential for advocating and educating donor governments that eradication will quickly reap a financial benefit of at least $50 billion. Rotarians rose to the Rotary challenge and raised an incredible US $200 million in additional financing in record time to help finish polio. Rotarians must now challenge donor countries to do the same thing. Rotarians must write to their leaders everywhere, repeatedly and ceaselessly, to make the case for financing polio eradication. We can't afford to be cutting corners in an emergency. But in March of this year, polio campaigns were canceled in nearly 24 polio-free countries because donor governments have not yet caught up with the generosity of Rotarians. Reaching every last child with something as simple as a polio vaccine is still expensive. In the Congo, roads collapse and our vehicles have to be dug out so that our teams can carry on. In Afghanistan and elsewhere, the costs of security are soaring as we try to keep our teams safe. Rotarians, make the case for full financing of eradication. Write to your governments, meet with your ministers of international assistance. Make sure your government knows how generous you, Rotarians, have been and challenge them to match you. Rotary's voice is absolutely essential to ensure every child is vaccinated in the last infected countries. In Nigeria, and in Pakistan, in Afghanistan and in Chad, and in any country that becomes reinfected. In every polio-infected country, every Rotarian can make the difference. Local Rotarians can monitor the quality of polio campaigns better than anyone. Local Rotarians can report on gaps in implementation better than anyone else. And local Rotarians can cajole national and local leaders into holding their vaccination teams accountable for reaching every child. Ladies and gentlemen, every Rotarian in every polio-infected country could now make the difference between failure and a victory for children that lives on in perpetuity. Rotary's voice is also essential within Rotary itself. Indian Rotarians enjoyed huge solidarity with Rotarians worldwide as they led the charge to complete eradication in that country. Rotarians worldwide were generous with their moral support and their encouragement. And this support, this encouragement, was absolutely essential for Indian Rotarians. It sustained and motivated them through the dark days when the challenges of reaching every child with the polio vaccine looked overwhelming. There are remarkable, inspiring Rotarians at work in Nigeria, in Pakistan, and in Afghanistan. Support them in this emergency. Think hard how your club, wherever you are in the world, can reach out to every Rotarian in Nigeria, in Pakistan, and even in Afghanistan to help. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 years ago, Rotary recognized India as the greatest challenge to global polio eradication, and Rotarians made Polio Plus in India an organization-wide emergency. Today, India is polio-free, and Rukhsar Khatoon is your proof that polio can be eradicated everywhere. Today, Rotary's vision of a polio-free world is much, much closer to reality. The world is declaring the completion of polio eradication in these last few countries an emergency for global public health because the world believes in your vision. The world is declaring polio eradication an emergency because we believe in your dream of a polio-free world. Now, your energy, your advocacy, and your generosity must be the energy that drives this emergency. Rotarians, a polio-free tomorrow is this close now. Rotarians, seize this opportunity, change history forever, and end polio now. Thank you.
It was worth making the journey, wasn't it? And I know that when the world is certified as polio-free, that Rotary is going to be there, and so is Bruce Aylward. So thanks again, Bruce. That was inspiring. Our next speaker is a personal friend. Yesterday he approached me with a sheet of paper and said, "I've written out my biographical notes." And when he handed it to me, it had nothing on it. So I thought I might respond by suggesting that I'm sure that every one of you has heard in a Rotary meeting somebody say, "Our next speaker needs no introduction," so I wouldn't. But in case you don't know who our next speaker is, you can perhaps ask your neighbour and they will tell you that our next speaker is John Germ. He is a current trustee, but he has been the chair and the champion of our $200 million challenge. Please welcome John Germ.
Thank you, Bill. You read that like I wrote it. I have a pleasant duty of being here to make some final comments for this session. But you know, I really don't know what else to say since so much has been said by Mrs. Burla and by Bruce Elward. But I am truly honored to join you today at this international convention. Over the last 4.5 years, I've had the privilege of serving as chairman of Rotary's $200 million challenge aimed at continuing support of polio eradication. The funds raised for this challenge and the continuing support of polio eradication efforts are important to remember until the goal of the certification of the eradication has been reached. Through all my travel, my personal belief that Rotarians are optimists has been reinforced. After all, we persuaded the world that polio eradication was possible. That was back when polio afflicted about 350,000 people every year in over 125 countries. A lot of people thought we were crazy, but that was before we reached the number of cases, reduced the number of cases by 99.5%. A lot of people also thought that India would never be polio-free. But as you just heard, in January of 2012, thanks to the support of Rotarians around the world, and especially those Rotarians in India, India celebrated a full year without a new case and, as Bruce said, has now been declared a non-endemic country. Rotarians are also optimistic when it comes to raising money, a lot of money, $2 billion to be precise. In the 2 prior fundraising campaigns to help eradicate polio, clubs and districts exceeded contribution goals. We were asked to raise $120 million from 1986 to 1988, but we raised $247 million. And go ahead, give yourself a round of applause. In 2002 and 2005, the goal was $80 million, and Rotarians raised $135 million. Now that got the attention of the richest man in the world, and in 2009, Bill Gates announced at the International Assembly that his foundation was giving Rotary $355 million. But there was a caveat. In return, he asked us to raise a $200 million match by June the 30th of 2012. To raise the money, $200 million, Rotary clubs were encouraged to reach out to the public to secure contributions. We did not want the challenge to negatively affect our annual programs fund and the growth we have seen in every Rotarian every year. We'll celebrate reaching this important milestone, but it doesn't mean that we'll stop raising money or spreading the word about polio eradication. Our clubs are still planning polio fundraisers for this and coming Rotary years and encouraging donations from people in their communities. And even when the challenge ends next month, we know that we haven't reached our goal. We haven't ended polio. There may be a few of you in this room who have never received the smallpox vaccination, because that disease was eradicated before you were born. We have that opportunity now to make history by eradicating a second disease and creating a world where no one will ever need to be vaccinated against polio. No child will ever be crippled, and no child will ever die because we failed to reach them in time. We are this close, and we are getting closer, as you heard Bruce say just a few moments ago. Every day is very important. But we can't stop. We can't stop until our entire world is certified polio-free. That was your promise, my promise, and Rotarians' promise in 1985, and it remains our promise today. The challenge has received many generous major gifts from Rotarians and non-Rotarians. Ms. Risberla, who you heard from earlier just a few moments ago, has contributed over US $5 million in support of polio eradication. However, the majority of the contributions for the challenge were raised through the family of Rotary. There's absolutely no limit to the number of ways Rotarians raised funds for Polio Plus. Sponsoring a mountain climb, holding a raffle, hosting a Purple Pinky Day are just a few ways money was raised for the challenge. Throughout this challenge, the entire family of Rotary has been involved. Rotary actors throughout the world have been involved in raising funds for the challenge. The Rotaract Club of Washington County, Oregon, had a panhandling for polio project that raised over $700 in 4 hours. Rotary actors throughout the world have raised over $259,609 for this challenge. The challenge also received great support from Interact clubs throughout the world as well. In total, they've raised over US $309,239. The Foundation Alumni Advisory Committee accepted the challenge for all alumni to raise a total of US $1 million for Rotary's $200 million challenge. In total, alumni has raised $836,629 toward their goal of $1 million. I believe that by June the 30th, when the challenge ends, they will in fact have met this goal. The challenge received support from over 13 Rotary fellowships and action groups. Together, all fellowships and action groups has raised over $142,300 for polio eradication. Not only do clubs and districts raise funds with these public events, but they have also raised the awareness of the need to eradicate polio. Educating the public about polio eradication is a critical part of Rotary's outreach efforts. You may remember hearing President Banerjee mention yesterday that one of the goals for this year was to raise the public profile of Rotary. This brief video of a news report from the BBC earlier this year is a step in the right direction, as it positions Rotary in the forefront of the polio eradication campaign.
No child must be missed. In every slum, in every back street, the immunization teams are at work, giving 2 drops of polio vaccine to children under 5. Polio has long since been wiped out in Britain. Now add to that India. The virus used to spread via open sewers and contaminated water. It means the disease now has a stronghold in just a few countries, including Pakistan, Afghanistan and Nigeria.
That's how easy it is to protect a child against polio. And if India can get rid of the virus, the question is, why can't every country?
Badly organised immunisation programmes which lack the political commitment shown here in India is partly why other countries have failed to stamp out the virus. India has long benefited from volunteer vaccinators from Britain, members of Rotary clubs. They've been raising money and the profile of polio for years.
When we started coming and bringing volunteers, we were talking about 500 and 700 victims a year. It's like a big plane crash every year, and if you thought that you'd prevented that every year, it's a fantastic achievement, and I'm looking forward to being redundant in this job.
Priyanka is one of several children at this school who suffered permanent paralysis from polio. She needed several operations before learning to walk with the help of calipers. Her wish is that no other child should get polio and for the disease to disappear forever.
We have not reached the goal of the certification of the eradication of polio. However, I am happy to announce that we've met the U.S. $200 million challenge. Congratulations, Rotarians. On behalf of the children of the world, I thank you for what you have done. I thank you for what you are doing. And I thank you for what you are going to do. And as of May the 4th, you have raised $215,754,500 to end polio now. Thank you.
There's a Scottish proverb that says, "You never miss the water until the well runs dry." For millions of people in this world, that well has already run dry. They simply do not have access to fresh, safe water. Water security is a question of peace. For if people do not all have access to water, how can you have peace? Now, we have talked about how Rotarians can make a big difference with small changes, how we can make peace through service. Let us take a look at water. We have water in our homes, but are we using it as efficiently as we can? You may say to me, "Kalyan, if I install a low-volume shower head, how will that help a child in Africa?" "Kalyan, if I make my toilets use less water, how can I save that water for a family in India?" Well, here is a water twist. Call your local water utility or calculate how much you will save per year by using a low-volume shower head times the number of showers that your family takes per year. And then donate that savings directly to the Rotary Foundation for Water Projects. You may say $50 or 55 euros or maybe even 4,000 yen. Invest that same amount every year with the Rotary Foundation for Water Projects. Then every time you shower, you will know the money you are donating is being converted into water for families that need fresh water, thus saving lives and working towards world peace. Thank you for attending today's third plenary session. Please consult your program books for information regarding breakout sessions and activities in the House of Friendship in Challenger 3. I look forward to seeing you here tomorrow for the fourth and the closing plenary sessions of this convention. This session is adjourned.